How can a colocation data center provider improve its lead generation? How can a colocation provider improve its lead generation? I think the first most interesting place to start is I want to clarify two parts of that, because I see two parts of this question being used interchangeably with very different intents. For starters, I see colocation offered by technology-focused companies that want to sell a lot of professional services, managed services along with colocation. And then I see a more commoditized version of colocation that's offered by telecommunications carriers who, yes, they'll sell some professional services, but they're not blurring the line quite as much, with almost encroaching on the territory of what people would have looked at normally as the domain of MSPs, of managed service providers. So let's first talk about whether you're selling a premium kind of colocation that has healthy profit margins, that can afford to have a great consultative sales process wrapped around it where you're educating and building trust, or whether you're selling colocation that's more just a commoditized almost SKU that could be in some scenarios self-purchased. I actually did a podcast interview a couple months back with the CEO of a national data center provider that started really in colocation, but considers themselves probably more heavily involved in managed services. And his take on the whole thing was the days of smile and dial are done. Your salesperson going forward should be able to have conversations with IT executives that really truly add value, so they can really understand what that client wants to do and make consultative recommendations. And it wasn't just this interview with, by the way, that was with Ian McClarty from phoenixNAP. You can find that on our podcast website at DCSMI.com/podcast. Did another interview that's going to be going live in the next couple of weeks with someone that was heading up BDRs, like business development reps from a large data center provider. Very similar kind of sentiment, where the sales team really looks a lot more like fractional CTOs than traditional transaction-focused salespeople. And that interview was Brandon Peccoralo. It's been announced, but hasn't gone live yet. Probably by the time you're watching this, it will already be live. And again, you can find that at DCSMI.com/podcast. So the idea is that your sales team in a colocation context should have so much expertise on anything and everything that goes into your data center that that person is strong enough that they could be moonlighting as a fractional CTO nights and weekends for small and medium-sized businesses in the area, really at that kind of level. And that's what completely changes the conversation. So your prospects and clients actually want to spend time with members of your sales team, so they're adding value as opposed to chasing and begging for attention. So that's kind of the colocation provider context, both the colocation business model and how there's been a dramatic shift in upskilling and upping the ante and what a successful sales team looks like in and around colocation. The other side of that is, let's talk about lead generation. Because whenever I host these kinds of events, webinars, live stream conferences, consultations, there are two different ways of using the words lead generation. When you talk to someone that works in sales enablement, sales operations, marketing technology, a lead is a pretty early stage contact. A lead might be someone who registers for a webinar, downloads an ebook or something like that. And it's just, you've taken someone that was previously anonymous and they're now a known contact sitting in your CRM. And depending on the nature of whether there's validation on the form and the targeting of the traffic of how they got there and everything like that, you now have a person at a certain company, but you really don't know much else about their behavior with your company and their intent and where they are in the particular buyer's journey. When I talk with salespeople, they usually interchangeably use the term lead and opportunity. An opportunity, when you talk with someone that works in sales enablement or sales ops or marketing technology, an opportunity is pretty late stage. That's a known contact who's done enough, who's demonstrated enough behaviors and intent and interest in your company that they've been passed to the sales team. A human from the sales team is validated that, like, yep, this looks like a good account. I had at least a quick conversation with this person. They're for sure in market for what it is that we do. And even after like a single conversation, I can come up with at least a rough guesstimate of a forecasted close date and a forecasted deal size. That is an opportunity. What happens all too often in co-location among relatively unsophisticated go-to-market teams that don't have a lot of these big resources internally is there starts to be problems among internal team members because these two different concepts, an early stage lead and a late stage sales opportunity, is being used interchangeably. So if you want to make sure that your sales and marketing folks actually get along with each other and have healthy respect and collaboration with each other, first make sure that they're speaking the same terminology, using these terms correctly as opposed to incorrectly. And it'll create a much healthier working environment and stave off a lot of resentment and potential friction down the road. So for a co-location provider, given that context of the two different kinds of co-location, the old school versus the new, more CTO-like sales professional, and the differing views of lead generation, what do we do to put all of that together? Well, what that means is we need to take the really highly educated IT salespeople in these co-location companies, and we need to help them reposition and have a makeover so they're heavily involved in your company's thought leadership and education delivery, content, events, type of strategy and approach. So by the time their prospects are ready for actually a one-on-one sales conversation, the know, like, and trust has already dramatically been built up. So in many ways, your sales team needs to be prepared to come in much earlier on in the buyer's journey than they ever have previously in their careers, so that they show up as a consultant, a teacher, a trusted advisor, a subject matter expert, and perhaps even a thought leader. And conversely, your marketing team members need to be prepared to help support that particular scenario all the way very deep into the buyer's journey, so that you make sure in those 28 touch points between complete stranger and purchase decision that you and your team are showing up as early and as often as possible to really knock it out of the park with early stage lead generation, middle stage lead generation, and late stage lead generation, which we'd call a sales opportunity. So you have awareness stage, consideration stage in the middle of the funnel, the middle of the journey, and decision stage. So we really need to make sure to go next level with improving your lead generation, that we get aligned on the nature of your co-location business model, the role of what your sales team and your client-facing team members needs to look like going forward. No one needs them to read the website to them anymore. They need to operate at a much, much higher level. And how do we do lead generation, intentional lead generation throughout the full buyer's journey, not just early, not just late, but several times throughout, and as many of those 28 touch points as possible. So we stay with those prospects and clients throughout the full buyer's journey and are seen as the definitive go-to experts on anything and everything having to do with co-location.